On tonight's episode, we'll cover Kevin Feige's move to Star Wars, the Joker, and copyright termination of some of your favorite franchises. I'm Joe.
I'm Garrett. And this is the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. Welcome in, guys. Tonight, Joe and I, one-on-one here.
That's right.
We're going to be debating. It's winner take all. Just kidding. Nellie is probably, let's see here. It's been raining out
It has
the
been
last
raining.
48 hours.
Yes.
Nellie is probably drowning in a tree, getting ready for hunting season.
Take to the high ground, Nelly.
Yeah. Has hunting season even started yet, Nellie? And Nate is actually not with us tonight. He is still hungover from the previous episode. He will be back with us next week. So, Joe, you and I tonight, and this is interesting. This might be, I'm trying to think the last time you and I did a podcast episode for Aliens and Cowboys where it was just the two of us. Can you think of what episode that would have been?
Was it Die Hard?
I was thinking,
episode 2?
It probably would have been Tombstone.
Was that just us?
That was just us. We just did Tombstone.
Okay, I got you.
And
I thought Nate was with us on Tombstone.
No, not on Tombstone.
Fair enough.
We might have done two guys walk into a bar where we just kind of were shooting the shit for the hour. But for the most part, it's been a while.
It has been a while.
And it was one of those things where I was thinking today, the original incarnation of this podcast was supposed to just arguably be the two of us. And we kind of come up with Nate, and Nate ended up coming on board, and it was great, and we're glad Nate's here.
Definitely.
But this is kind of an interesting thing because, we're going to deep dive some pretty interesting topics, and it's there's a lot to cover tonight.
There is some really interesting things that I had not even known was applicable to the movie industry until we read about it today. So we'll get into that later. But some pretty exciting stuff, I think, for tonight's episode.
Well, before we start, I wanted to give some listener feedback. So one of the listeners of this podcast is my mother, and she's probably one of my toughest critics. She listens.
Tough love.
Yeah, I mean, she listens to this thing, and she probably doesn't understand, 80% of what we're actually covering. She just listens for everything else under the sun, and she just critiques it. Well, she took issue with my description of Rambo as just okay. So my mother. And I went with my mother and my father to see Rambo, and my father's a big Rambo fan. My mother's a big Rambo fan.
Okay.
She said she felt very slighted that I reviewed Rambo the way that we did last episode, and that I didn't cover it as being a better film. So I told her on this particular episode I would mention that her feedback was that Rambo was much better than I gave it credit for, and she recommends everybody go see it.
All right. Hey, that's good
Mother,
feedback.
I hope you're happy. So
I will need to go see it. Admittedly, though, okay, so fill me in quickly here. Anything after really Rambo 2, is there any continuity that I need to be familiar with?
Yeah.
There is. Okay.
Yeah, there is. And Rambo 3, I have not seen Rambo 3 for some time. To be fair, I have not seen Rambo 1 or 2 for some time. So there is continuity between all of them. 3 is just not as good. 1 and 2 are really good. 4, I think, is really good. Where he's kind of more of a modern take. He's in Burma. It's more of a, basically these, I don't want to call them, they're not refugees. What are they? Like missionaries type people are trying to obviously save people, or they're trying to rescue people that are, obviously there's ethnic cleansing going on in the region.
Gotcha.
And they basically get captured by an insurgency or by a military presence, and Rambo comes to their aid. And it's extremely violent. It might even be the most violent film in the Rambo series. And I think it's
even more than the most recent one.
Yeah, the most recent one wasn't as bloody as I thought it was going to be. There's just very gratuitous violence at the end, but the majority of the film is actually pretty tame comparatively. And like I said, it's very much like the movie Taken. The premise of Taken and the premise of Rambo,
that's right,
this particular Rambo, Last Blood, are kind of identical. And so there's violence that happens throughout some of the film, skirmishes here or there, but the real gory scenes that you're used to of people getting limbs removed, cut off, chopped off, blown off, people getting really impaled by traps, because that's Rambo's thing, is he sets traps. It doesn't really come till the end of the film.
Okay,
so
I gotcha.
It was, like I said, I'm still going to maintain my review. It was simply okay in my opinion. So sorry, Mom, but I will tell everybody. Obviously, they know now that you thought it was better than I did. So
fair enough. Yeah, I imagine if you're a Rambo fan, you'd probably just enjoy it as well. So, yeah. Cool. Good deal. Well, hey, big thing that we wanted to talk about, I mentioned in the little intro there, was Kevin Feige being set to produce a Star Wars movie.
Yes.
pretty exciting stuff. I actually pulled this direct quote because I thought it'd be the easiest way to set up this transition for anyone who might not have heard. So a credit to the Hollywood Reporter for this series of quotes here. In response to a query from THR, Walt Disney Studios co-chairman and Chief Creative Officer Horn said, "We are excited about the projects Kathy and the Lucasfilm team are working on, not only in terms of Star Wars, but also Indiana Jones and reaching into other parts of the company, including Children of Blood and Bone with Emma Watts and Fox. With the close of the Skywalker saga, Kathy is pursuing a new era in Star Wars storytelling, And knowing what a diehard fan Kevin is, it made sense for these two extraordinary producers to work on a Star Wars film together." End quote. Okay. I think that's really interesting. He's kind of pivoting away after the success of the MCU, it sounds like, and setting his sights on the Star Wars universe.
Okay. I have to admit, my first reaction to this was not necessary excitement.
Okay.
I absolutely understand that in relation to Marvel, he is 100% successful. He capped off something that might not ever be done before as far as connecting one through, 22 movies, 23 movies straight in a franchise. That I think they've grossed over $26.8 billion. Just absolute monster success, right? My concern, though, is Star Wars is not Marvel. And I don't know if this is an attempt... obviously, everybody doesn't fully comprehend where they're really going to take Star Wars yet because they really don't even know, right? We've talked about upcoming projects. So we know The Mandalorian's out. We know there's going to be a potential Cassian Andor series, Obi-Wan movie. We know that Rian Johnson's supposed to get a trilogy. I don't know if Benioff and Weiss are still getting a trilogy.
I think that's still floating around out there, but I have not heard any movement on that for quite some time. So who knows the timetables we're talking about with these.
And because they want to move away from the Skywalker saga, the 9 film arc of these characters, and they want to go to different aspects of this infinite galaxy, there's an infinite number of stories and characters we can create out of nowhere. We can create stories that have never been touched by the Empire's battle. In theory, that's possible. And I don't know if that's where they want to take it, if they're going to always bring in small aspects of it. But particularly Feigi has been successful at creating stories by bringing individual people from their own story and putting them into a group. Star Wars seems to be the complete opposite. It is more of a functioning of a group that people get occasional spin-off movies. So it's almost going to be an inverse of what he has been successful at. And so I have trepidation to say, yeah, it's going to be awesome that he's doing this.
Sure.
So what do you tell me I'm wrong?
Well, overall, I did have kind of the opposite take on that. So based on the success he has of establishing the MCU, bringing together a variety of different talent, and obviously there's a lot of people behind the scenes beyond just Kevin Feige that contribute to the success of a movie. So I'm not trying to say it's all Kevin Feige that's been able to create the success. But still, producing, kind of being at the forefront of that, helping collaborate, coordinate all these different aspects of these films to create a coherent story across that many individual entries is pretty awesome. There's not been anything quite like it before that. So to see the person in charge of that overall now moving to my favorite franchise, or at least one of my favorite franchises with Star Wars, that makes me really excited. Now, I do agree with you, Garrett. I don't want to see him try to set up a new 20-movie story arc with Star Wars characters. So I think he needs to take a step back from that approach. But his ability to produce high-quality, entertaining films is amazing. His track record's there. So this has something, I think they're setting themselves up, I should say, for success for the future of Star Wars by making that partnership and allowing him to come on board with that side of things.
I mean, yeah, if you go back and you look at his actual filmography as far as a producer, whether it's associate, co-producer, executive producer, from 2000 till now, every basically major Marvel character, X-Men, Spider-Man, Daredevil, even when they didn't own the rights to them, Hulk, Punisher, Spider-Man 2, Elektra, Man-Thing, Fantastic Four, X-Men Last Stand, all the way down to the Iron, when you get to Fantastic Four, Rise of Silver Surfer, Iron Man, basically to what we have currently, he has been a part of everything. And again, not doubting how successful he's been able to be. What I'm going to potentially doubt, though, is he was taking from content that already existed, being able to match those stories. Star Wars, from my understanding of where they're taking it, is going to be to create 100% new stories. So there's no proof that he can create new stories, right?
To a certain extent.
Like, the Infinity War is an existing concept of a comic book arc. Doesn't mean they took 100% from it, but the blueprints for everything that he has accomplished have a history built out of their, comic books, movies, other shows, other characters. Basically, these characters are set. If he was taking over the Skywalker saga and continuation of that, and these characters that already existed, or the Star Wars Legends before they ruined it as far as canon goes, I would have more, but I would think he would be more successful. And not to say he's not going to be successful. I would not question how successful he could be.
Gotcha.
Because he has to create now. And I don't know if he's just doing one film. Have they said how many films he is going to do?
No, I don't think we know any of that. I think it's a little bit too early in the talks to know the extent of his future producing duties, let's say.
Okay.
But he's involved in some capacity at the very least. Sure. And I would actually say, conversely, that there's still a lot of that material that he can pull from. So in terms of creating that 100% new content, I get, yes, that they might want to start taking the franchise in that direction, stepping away from the Skywalkers, just like that quote said, just like we've been talking about already, that the next series of movies is going to be probably unlike anything we've seen yet because they're completely sidelining most of the characters and the legacy characters that we're familiar with. But what Feige can do, very similar to what he did with the MCU, is take the old canon that is technically not canon yet and still find a way to introduce that and incorporate that into something that is in the new canon. So he can still pull a lot from that pre-existing material. Honestly, if he does it well, which once again, this is where I have a lot of faith in him to do that. If he does this well, he could win over a lot of people, maybe some people that have been disgruntled with how Disney has handled that legacy material up to this point. I think if he finds a way to reintroduce it while not, retconning what now is the Skywalker saga, if he finds a way to reintroduce those characters that haven't been canon yet, that could be a huge win for him. That could be a whole new set of success stories for how he's able to take old canon that is no longer current canon and actually bring it back in some capacity. There's a lot of room to do that. A lot of very popular characters that have not been officially brought back into canon. So I think it's a goldmine for him that he can pick just about whatever he wants out of there.
Don't disagree. Do you have any... I don't know, fear's not the correct word, but obviously we love movies. We don't want movies, ruined. We don't want... I think you and I both agree that we prefer Star Wars over Marvel. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I like the Star Wars story better.
Agreed.
Is there like a fear of the Marvel, basically Marvelification of Star Wars? Like, do we want everything to be in the vein of Marvel? And I guess that's the way I'm looking at this. Like, is there any slight part of you that might question, like, should we just keep Star Wars a completely separate entity from the Marvel aspect of Disney? Let Star Wars do Star Wars. They'll still create the same people. I mean, from what they're doing with Mandalorian with Jon Favreau, like, great.
Yeah.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Rogue One, great. Solo, better than people give it credit for.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Except for Rian Johnson's, crap of a movie. I just think that I guess, again, not saying he won't be successful, because he'll be successful. He'll probably get the right people to do this. I just don't know if I need Star Wars to become molded similarly to Marvel, and that's what I think they're going to do. I think they're two completely separate entities in my viewpoint right now.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that.
They have two separate feels. Like, I feel differently about Star Wars when I watch it than I do about these Marvel movies. I don't want them to become intermeshed where I can't differentiate what I'm watching anymore. And I'm concerned about that.
So you don't want the MCU recipe, as a lot of people refer to it, being interjected into the Star Wars universe.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't want that multi-movie setup necessarily. Is that safe to assume?
I'm not afraid of a 20-movie franchise if it's great. If you want to give me 20 Star Wars films that are awesome, that's great. I'll take
watch it. Yeah, for sure.
But I don't want and I don't think he'll take the same blueprint, right? I'm not saying he's going to create a solo movie, not doing Solo, but a movie where a character similar to a Han Solo is going to have his own individual film, and then a Chewbacca stand-in is going to have their own individual film, and we're going to all of a sudden unite all these people into an Avengers-style Millennium Falcon ship, and they're going to save the day. I do not believe that will happen.
Okay.
But what I don't want to have happen is that when I'm watching Star Wars, I just see Marvel, and I just feel like it's Marvel.
Okay, well, so funny you mentioned that, just because there are people that were previously part of the MCU or currently are still part of the MCU that do want to be in Star Wars movies as well. So two people especially have given everybody a shout out that they'd be interested in Star Wars. One being Brie Larson, Captain Marvel. The other being Chris Evans, Captain America.
Woof and woof.
What would you do if you saw Chris Evans show up as a Jedi in a Star Wars movie?
I would be disappointed.
Would you be disappointed?
Still on the record, it's not a Chris Evans fan.
That's true. You have mentioned that before.
I'm not a fan of Chris Evans. I'm interested to see Chris Evans in the movie Knives Out.
Yes.
Okay.
Directed by Ryan Johnson.
By Ryan Johnson.
Yeah.
So, yes. I was going to say Guy Ritchie, but it's not Ryan Johnson.
No.
But he's starring Daniel Craig, which is really why I'm going to see this movie.
Yes.
But I'm interested to see Chris Evans in this role. I'm not a big Chris Evans fan. I don't necessarily think he's a great actor. I don't want to see him show up as a Jedi somewhere. I don't want to see him show up as a villain. I don't want him to throw a curveball either.
You don't want him in anything Star Wars.
Again, I don't want the guy who played Johnny Storm, then Captain America, to now come in to do something else. Let's let him go off in the sunset, and he can do other movies like Knives Out. You want to prove to me you're a good actor? Then let's do some movies where there's actually good acting. Like, outside of Robert Downey Jr., I wouldn't say that the Marvel series has got great acting in it. I don't think anybody would be... I don't think that's offending anybody. I just don't think that there's a ton of great acting in Marvel, in superhero movies. You know, just like I question the great acting in something like Game of Thrones, right, compared to other TV shows. Mm-hmm. I think that if he wants to show he's a good actor, I think he needs to do movies like Knives Out. I think he needs to take roles other than what he's pigeonholed into. Brie Larson, haven't seen her in a ton of stuff. Wasn't a fan of her in Kong Skull Island. Not a fan of her in the Avengers Endgame. Didn't see her individual movie. I won't see it unless it comes on to like HBO probably or Disney Plus when it comes out, which is like T-minus a month from now.
Gosh, yeah,
which is amazing.
It's gonna be here before we know it.
But speaking of that, that's the other thing I don't want. I don't want them to cycle through these characters, these actors, that were all, what's Robert Downey Jr. going to show up as a Sith?
Who knows?
Is Josh Brolin going to show up as some kind of bounty hunter? Like, they're just going to show up as Cable?
Right?
I don't think that that's needed. And I think that's why I want Star Wars to be separate. Because what they're doing with Star Wars 2, which is great, is they're going with a bunch of different directors for things, right? They're doing, first-time directors, upstarts, different types of feel, different types of, styles. They're going to do with different actors that they've never worked with before. I like that.
Yeah.
Let their Star Wars thing, because they are experimenting with new stories, then experiment with new people. Don't just give me the same old, Guardians of the Galaxy 5, yet now it's going to Tatooine. You know what I mean? I don't want that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I personally, I'd be totally fine with seeing both of them in a Star Wars movie. We talked about this briefly, but I think it would be really cool to see Chris Evans play a Sith of some kind, because I want to see them readdress how a Sith behaves. That's one of the things I want to see in a new series of movies, maybe in a TV show, whatever the case may be. Because we've already gotten, well, obviously everything up to this point. And if they revisit the Old Republic, which this is what I'm hoping happens, and I have no idea if it's the direction they're going to take things, but if they have Kevin Feige somehow team up and oversee the project with Benioff and Weiss, that could be really cool.
It's like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones.
Yeah. And if they take that back to the Old Republic, which is what everyone is thinking they might be working on, which, to be fair to Benioff and Weiss, that's not... Just because they worked on a fantasy series doesn't mean that they have to take Star Wars back to what is kind of thought of as more of a fantasy element, because there's way more Jedi and Sith, so there's a lot more lightsabers involved, and basically it's got a much more medieval feel to it to a certain extent. So it's not necessarily fair to pigeonhole them thinking that that's the only thing that they could possibly do. That being said, it is what I want them to do. So it could be a really cool thing to see them all come together to create something that's set thousands of years prior to what we see in the Skywalker saga and really any other Star Wars movie, any other Star Wars spinoff, any other Star Wars cartoon show, and really tackle it from a completely different perspective where Jedi and Sith are numerous and the galaxy is in a completely different place than anything we've seen brought to the screen yet. So that could be really cool. Seeing Chris Evans in there, Brie Larson. I do hope they bring in a lot of new talent as well, because I don't want to see the same exact roster of people. It will look rather silly after a while if they do truly just start bringing MCU actors into the Star Wars franchise. But some, exchange between those two could be kind of cool. So that's where I sit on it.
I think if you were going to bring in a actor from the MCU, or a character to play a Sith,
yeah,
why don't you bring in Winter Soldier?
Oh, dude, yes.
I think Winter Soldier would, because of the way he has that look, he has the face. Like, the problem with Chris Evans is, Captain America coming in to play a Sith. I'm not going to buy it.
You're not buy it? Really?
I'm not going to buy it.
Okay. And that's more of my point too, where I referenced seeing a different side of the Sith that we haven't seen, and then I didn't really explain that. So some of the characters from the Old Republic, they're not necessarily as twisted in appearance as, let's say, Darth Maul, which you just look at him and you're like, oh yeah, of course he's a bad guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so now Count Dooku is a little different because from the outset, granted, he wears dark clothes, but he's not as inherently scary looking as some of the other Star Wars villains are, right?
Right, he's a white guy.
But yeah, but if you take him, take these characters back to the Old Republic setting, there's so many different Sith and so many different people of varying force abilities, right? And on kind of different sides of, are they good, are they bad, are they kind of that towing that gray Jedi line?
Sure.
So you could do a lot with that, but
I don't know. I mean, yeah. I get it, and I'm going to see whatever they put out. So I will give Kevin Feige his due. Here. He has earned it. I'm sure he'll be successful. I'm sure he'll get the right people for the right positions. Like I said, I'm excited for the Jon Favreau Mandalorian. I like what they're going to do with that. I'm excited for an Obi-Wan series. My question to you is this.
Sure.
Darth Vader. Do you think Darth Vader's the most iconic character of Star Wars?
Oh, the most iconic character of Star Wars? Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you. And I think that that's not a hot take, obviously, by any means. Do you feel like he'll show up in anything else? Do you feel like he'll show up in the Obi-Wan series, the Cassian Andor series, or do you feel like do you think there's any story out there where they give you a Darth Vader story, or do they just go away from the Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader storyline 100% after this?
I think no. I don't think they're going to abandon it completely. I think we will eventually hit a point, not soon, but I think we'll eventually hit a point where we potentially even see a Darth Vader series. So I do not think they're going to abandon that in the slightest. I do think, however, that he won't show up in Obi-Wan. I don't think he'll show up in Mandalorian. I don't think he'll show up in the prequel series to Rogue One. I think they're going to leave those things alone because, especially in regard to Obi-Wan, from the animated series, which is where they're pulling a lot of this, and with Darth Maul's official introduction to the big screen with Solo, he did survive. That becomes a plot in the animated series.
Yes.
And it takes place on Tatooine, the culmination of that exchange between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan. So I think, if anything, for a character that they might actually bring back to utilize more than he actually got screen time to thus far, it would be Darth Maul that we'll see in an Obi-Wan series.
It's funny because I personally like Darth Vader more than like Darth Maul or, Kylo Ren or Count Dooku or anybody, right?
Right.
General Grievous. But I thought about this the other day. As far as the movies go, and you can help me if I'm forgetting something, Darth Vader really never defeated anybody. For his being like the great villain that he is, he only really beats Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan gives up and say New Hope. He does cut off Luke's hand, so I'll give him that. He beats a very green, up-and-coming, arguably Padawan Jedi. Does not defeat that Jedi in the third one, right? In the first movie, he's a boy, can't really do anything. Second movie, he gets smoked by Dooku. The third movie, he only beats Dooku basically because of the help of Palpatine, essentially getting him to surrender essentially in that throne room. And if we're going to say he actually kills him, then the only person he arguably kills that is of any any significance is Dooku, outside of the children. Other than that, there's not a lot of people that he's taken out.
I get film-wise,
as far as being such a great character, right, and such an evil villain or good, amazing, guy in the first prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy, like he doesn't have that great of a body count.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree with you. I think that in the setup in A New Hope, the fact that he's able to take out Obi-Wan, yeah, sure, I get the fact that Obi-Wan's older, but you also understand that Obi-Wan's very strong in the Force. He's very wise. And so for Vader to be able to still best him in combat, I think that still shows his prowess. And Obi-Wan accomplishes what he wants to accomplish in that sequence.
He does give up.
Yeah, but he also becomes one with the Force as a result of that.
I understand.
So,
but I'm saying he doesn't actually strike him down while in combat.
Right.
He strikes him down when Obi basically surrenders as placing his lightsabers basically straight up and down.
Well, yeah.
So,
but I mean,
do I think Vader beats him essentially? I think Vader would beat him essentially. I do think Vader eventually would have beat him just because, like you said, he's younger. He's more of a machine. He's not going to get tired. But I'm saying on screen, Vader's kill count outside of choking random people and killing, random dudes, it's not that impressive.
Okay, I disagree with you, and especially too pulling. And I get the fact that, and I'll also revisit another example of this that is on the big screen. But I get the fact that what I'm about to say is not maybe what everybody has seen, but there are so many examples in canon of Vader being utterly terrifying, and he is the baddest dude out there when it comes to having a body count, like in the comic books that are still canon, and the animated series that are still canon. He's wrecking people constantly.
But in the films,
Rogue One,
right? But outside of, but what I'm saying though is you can wreck the random person. I'm saying anybody that's a significant force to reckon with, he's not wrecking anybody.
Well, but that's also because he's helped lead forces to kill every other Jedi out there.
No,
by the time we get to the movies, the original trilogy, pretty much the only other Star Wars fans, we know that there are other Jedi out there beyond Luke and Obi-Wan. But based on the original trilogy, those are pretty much the only two left.
Yes.
The first one, his former master, kills him. The second one, his son, he cuts his hand off trying to convince him to join the dark side. Well, that's pretty horrible things to be doing, and I think shows how insidious he is.
Not saying he's not insidious, not saying he's not a big baddie. I'm just simply pointing out that for this guy on the big screen, for the first 6 films, the resume of actual deaths that you can attribute to it that he struck down isn't impressive. Darth Maul arguably has a more impressive kill list by actually killing Qui-Gon Jinn than Obi-Wan Kenobi basically surrendering during a lightsaber fight. And I'm not even a Darth Maul fan.
I know you're not.
I'm a Darth Vader fan. I was just thinking about this the other day, probably why I should have been working. And I kind of went through all of the people that Darth Vader that I remember him killing in the movies. And I'm like, wow, that's actually not that impressive. Even as Anakin. And I'm not saying like it's not terrifying to watch him strike down the sand creatures. That is. But he should be able to do that. Now, him being able to strike down even though he doesn't fight General Grievous, but like, had he killed General Grievous, great, give him a check mark for that. Like, give him a notch on his belt. He's not really taking out that many significant people either. He doesn't get to take out Jango Fett. He doesn't get to take out General Grievous. Like, Obi-Wan's doing the heavy lifting for Anakin, as he should. He's the Jedi. But I mean, in the second movie, he instead of killing Dooku smokes him again.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I just, it's clearly a tangent we're going down right now about Darth Vader, but
yes,
because I would like
Darth
Vader. I like Darth Vader, and he's such an iconic character. It'd be like if X-Men were to go away from Wolverine. I just don't feel like that would be successful. Now, I think that there are tons of X-Men out there. You could do stories about it, but I think that isn't Darth Vader the most iconic character in Star Wars, and we're talking about not seeing him anymore. I guess I don't agree with that. I think that they should. You don't have to do a Skywalker trilogy. You could just keep him in the background somewhere.
Sure. And I think they certainly will in some capacity. They'll have him in the background. I think in terms of Star Wars, Vader's presence will always be felt just because he is such an iconic character and he's so integral to the entire, now 9 Skywalker saga series of films. And then while they might not really directly address him for the foreseeable future because they're wanting to put a bow, is what they're saying, on the Skywalker saga, with episode 9 coming out in December. So they'll probably leave it alone for a while, but once again, we will get Vader back in some capacity, maybe 5 years from now. maybe even sooner, but they'll probably put it on the back burner a little bit.
Well, it's really funny that they want to put a bow on the Skywalker series, as they call it, but they're going to do an Obi-Wan series now, which, as far as I'm aware, exists within the Skywalker series.
Yes, well, that's true.
You know what I mean?
You can't talk about Obi-Wan without talking about
Darth
Skywalkers.
Vader. And maybe Darth Vader pops into Obi-Wan.
Maybe he will.
I mean, I don't think he needs to be like a significant figure. I think he needs to be present, though, because the threat of him should always be present because of what Obi-Wan's story goes on to be, and where Obi-Wan ends up by the time the New Hope takes place. So I would hope that, Anakin Skywalker or / Darth Vader somehow his presence is felt.
Right.
So
right. I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And yes, I agree with you. While I have said I think they're going to do something different necessarily, I would still like to see him integrated somehow.
Sure.
Into those. Yeah.
I want you, though, between now and the next time we film this, Joe, I want you to go back and then think of, on the big screen, Darth Vader's resume. I want you to think of the people he's killed. And again, not randos with guns, because they should stand no chance against him. I'm talking legitimate people that you would think, okay, that's an actual, somebody who could do damage to Darth Vader. Just think it through. We could talk about it tomorrow when we're on work. I'm just saying, I just think of that, kill count not being that impressive. But go ahead.
Sorry, also really random, and I understand we should move on beyond Star Wars here, but Joel Egerton, he played Uncle Owen at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Rumors are swirling right now that he will reprise that role.
Nice.
In the Obi-Wan series. That has not been confirmed at all as of the time of this recording, but the rumor mill's churning, which could be kind of interesting.
To put a bow on Star Wars here, we saw that movie poster, it looked like, and I don't know if this was real or not, with C-3PO holding a bowcaster. Was that real?
Here's the thing that I find really interesting, because I was trying to go back through to see if that was a fake poster, and I think it might have been.
I hope it is.
Full disclosure, everyone, I need to go back and research when the poster we're referring to dropped, but I think it was debunked at the time as being a fake. The poster we are referring to has a bunch of Sith troopers at the bottom. It has C-3PO just slightly off-center to the left, holding Chewbacca's bowcaster, and I think he even has the bandolier on. Funny enough, Force Friday and previews for the new toy line coming out, however, he's got a bowcaster. I think the poster is fake, potentially, but the fact that he might have a bowcaster at some point is not
I'll tell you
fake.
This right now. If C-3PO shoots anybody in this film, it might as well go the way of Rian Johnson.
Not to mention the fact that there is a new character that's been introduced. This is, for anyone who has a very strict idea of what a spoiler might be, stop listening for the next 30 seconds. But this is something that Lucasfilm has confirmed, not a leak. But there's a new character. It's a tiny little alien figure. I apologize, I don't know the name off the top of my head. But he is able to kind of reconfigure droids, and he's able to hack their systems and basically make them do whatever he wants.
Nope, I don't want that.
So putting 2 and 2 together here, seeing C-3PO with the bowcaster and now this confirmed little alien guy who can hack droids, I'm like, okay, do these two things go together
if
here?
He turns into Rambo, you're talking, if I don't know how popular C-3PO is. I think people like him. He's
the original comedic relief, essentially.
He's a canon character.
Yes.
I think he's better than Jar Jar Binks. If you start having him start nuking people, send him the way of Jar Jar Binks. I can't believe they would take it to that degree. Because the reason why is, if you think about Solo and Rogue One, the droids have been great, right?
Yeah.
Especially, I don't remember the one in Rogue One, but the Rogue One droid was the best.
Oh, totally. L337, I think. It's
sure.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, the one voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Fleabag.
Yes.
That's an awesome droid. If you take C-3PO for what you just can't do it. I had a problem with the way they handled R2-D2 in Revenge of the Sith as he's flying around with little jet propellers, shocking people.
Yeah, I don't understand why they did that either.
No, and so just drop the bowcaster, put it down, let him be a decoy, or maybe he puts it on and walks out and gets shot right away. Way better.
Who knows?
Yeah. Just let's not have them start nuking people.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
let's move
moving on.
So what I want to cover next, Joe, is going to be, let's talk the Joker.
Sure.
So I think it drops tomorrow.
Yeah, the Thursday night releases start tomorrow. Official release date is the 4th.
So I want to talk the Joker, and then I want to talk about Todd Phillips, because he's the director and he got in some hot water recently. But let's just talk Joker. So Joker comes out tomorrow, rated R. A lot of hoopla behind this before it even comes out. There's movie theaters like Aurora, where the shooting happened during, I think, The Dark Knight. Yeah. They're not going to show this film.
Right.
There are other movie theaters who will not allow people to dress up as the Joker to attend the film. I'm okay with that. I think that's fair. I get it. We live in a heightened situation, or like a hypersensitive time. I'm okay with that. I don't have any problems with telling people you can't dress like the Joker for this. And I have no problem with Aurora saying we're not showing this film.
Right.
But I have problems with everybody else taking the approach that this is a movie as art that should not be taking place because of the type of political climate we're in, where people called, quote unquote, incels, as they call them, might be using this as a playbook or a strategy as a way to conduct their own violent, actions later. This is a movie like tons of other movies, and I'm not saying there can't be copycats. I mean, what was it? People, Dexter, 13 Reasons Why, like any of these movies, Dexter about a serial killer, people can copycat that. 13 Reasons Why from Netflix.
Yeah.
People were killing themselves in the same way. Like, people are going to copycat off whatever they want to copycat off of.
Yeah.
I don't think this particular movie is going to bring out the dregs of society to start dressing up like clowns and killing people like crazy. Now, do I think there might be some crazy person, one or two, that does this to make a point? Maybe. But I don't think it's going to be everybody. I think the media made a much bigger deal out of this than should have been. I mean, they were practically saying, please don't shoot anybody at this movie. Please, we shouldn't have people shooting people at this movie. Like, are you begging people to shoot people at this movie so you can cover it? I just, not even speaking about what the actual movie's about. We're talking about what this character is supposed to symbolize. He's just supposed to symbolize a guy that's one bad day or bad life, and he, pushes back. And I think that it kind of reminded me, I was looking up the movie. You ever see A Clockwork Orange?
I've never seen it, but I'm certainly familiar with the premise.
I have not seen it for a while. We were not born when this movie was released.
Right.
It's the only movie I could think of where you have to, like, that maybe that heightened anxiety of like, well, we can't show this because this movie was essentially rated like X when it came out, and England and Ireland and the Roman Catholic Church said this was a condemned movie, and we couldn't show this movie because it's a futuristic look about these. I think it's based off a book, but Malcolm McDowell's character Alex I think he's like an 18-year-old kid. Him and his buddies go around and they start raping and killing people essentially, and it's about conversion therapy for this kid to quit being violent. But the point was, this film was, people were afraid this was going to give kids the idea to go out and perform these acts. And I think, of course, one person probably did do it, I believe, from what I read. But other than that, this movie's now gone by the wayside, and people aren't, drinking in milk bars trying to go around and kill people. This is a movie just like, I guess I don't see how, if Heath Ledger's Joker didn't perpetuate this as much, why are we afraid Joaquin Phoenix is? And that's part of my rant. Apologies. But I think this movie is blown out of proportion. I'm not going to run and see it. I am going to see this movie. But I do think we should have waited to condemn it as people or society before this movie was actually released. Thoughts?
Yeah, it does seem like a story that has really gone beyond a point that maybe it should have in terms of how they're interpreting the potential outcome. Because just like you said, it isn't even out yet. The vast majority of people haven't even seen it yet. And I remember, a couple weeks back, maybe at this point, seeing an initial story where someone was talking about the violent turn the movie apparently takes, and is this being used as justification to sympathize with this character? And that's where they thought the real danger was, where is this movie being too sympathetic to a character who uses his pain to lash back out against society, and then hence the copycats and things like that, where people's concern has come from.
Sure.
But now, fast forward to where we are. Like I said, that was a couple weeks ago, and I didn't see much about it other than this one little article. Now it's everywhere. Every single news outlet is covering this to a certain extent. So it seems like this really snowballed kind of beyond their control, where now everyone is panicking, but should everyone be? I mean, just like you said, we do unfortunately live in a time where this is something on everybody's mind. It's at the forefront when they walk out their front door a lot of the time, where could something awful like this happen when they're out and about. And that's a really scary thought. So I totally understand the sensitivity from that side of thing. Also, like you said, the Aurora Theater not showing it, yeah, totally agree. Like, that theater shouldn't be showing it. I understand that and I apologize, I don't know the name of the official group. I think they have an official group name that they've formed, but the survivors of that shooting, they penned a formal letter essentially advising against showing this movie and things of that nature. Once again, can totally understand where that group is coming from, because it is scary. They're having to live with those things, and that's awful. But I still can't escape the fact that it seems like it's also been blown out of proportion too.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, just simply writing that letter, also understanding why the letter is written, 100% understand that. I guess I don't agree with writing the letter, though. I get why they wrote the letter. I don't agree with them writing the letter. I think what they did was took a movie that people would have seen, and they made it so now it's a movie everybody wants to go see. And it's one of those things where you have to ask, is this something that maybe the movie studio was like, oh, let's put this out there? It's just as like a media thing. Like, let's create a media firestorm. I mean, rated R movies, rated R comic book movies, I want to get to that here in a second because I have a kind of like my hot take on rated R comic book movies, aren't as successful as non-rated R comic book movies. But I think that that's something where this movie, I can't imagine it's going to be much worse than a combination of The Dark Knight and The Purge. Nobody's running around killing a bunch of people in The Purge.
Yeah, The Purge is... I'm glad you brought that up, because if people are having this much concern about the Joker, and I guess I can kind of understand the Joker is a character so many people are aware of. Like, so many people that aren't even comic book fans, they understand who the Joker is and what he represents to a certain extent. So it has an inherent degree of popularity, let's say, that maybe others, like The Purge, probably didn't have. You know, that would appeal to maybe, horror fans. I've never seen them, but maybe horror fans are kind of...
Right, but in the same time
period. But, yeah, but there's so many other... To your point, there's so many other movies out there that have horrible things happening in them that people aren't making the same argument about.
Right. So what it is it comes down to, in the political climate we're at, Joaquin Phoenix is going to represent, like I said, that term, the incel, right? Arguably, he's the white male who's down on his luck in a city. He seems to be beaten down, physically, yes, but by society. And you can say, from the point of the incel, maybe he doesn't have a girlfriend, ever had a girlfriend, has never had sex, he's sexually frustrated, all this stuff, and he's going to lash out. It's kind of like that movie I mentioned earlier, Falling Down with Michael Douglas, where it's just a guy in a normal day, and I haven't seen this movie forever. I think it's in the either late 80s, early 90s. He just snaps, and he just goes nuts, and it's like everybody's one bad day away from being the Joker, as that tagline can be, and that's understandable, but... There's also a lot of people that are just going to go see this movie because it's going to be entertaining. And the performance that Joaquin Phoenix is going to turn in is probably going to be the best Joker performance we've ever had. Yeah. And I think that's why I want to see it. I'm not ready to go see this movie because I'm excited to join the dregs of society and dress like a clown. And there's movies like the movie It, right? Maybe somebody dressed up like that clown and went and kidnapped a kid. I don't know, but I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about people during... I think when the movie Scream came out, people wanted the mask, and maybe people were doing pranks on friends, but I didn't see copycat mass killings of people wearing the Scream mask, and that was a pretty symbolic thing when that movie came out. So, again, I think the hoopla is blown this out of proportion. But this also leads into the director, Todd Phillips. So, Todd Phillips gave an interview recently, I think it's like a day or two ago, and he is best known for previously being a director of comedies, and his work is actually really good. I had it pulled up here. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay, so Todd Phillips, director of Road Trip, Old School, Starsky and Hutch, School for Scoundrels. He wrote Borat. He directed the Hangover movies. He's a producer on Project X. He wrote and directed War Dogs. He produced A Star is Born with Bradley Cooper.
Did he really?
And he's going to write, direct, and produce The Joker. He has a very successful career. He said that he, obviously, as you can see from his filmography, he used to be predominantly in the comedy movies, right? Old school, Borat, Hangover, kind of that fraternity type, comedy.
Yeah.
And he said he got out of comedy because of the type of culture we're in, of this cancel culture, where you're so afraid of offending everybody, it's not fun anymore. Okay. And so obviously when he made this interview, Twitter came for him. And they said, "Oh, the tough guy. He can't. He's so worried about everybody being offended, not liking his comedy. Yet he runs from Twitter. He's offended. He can't take the criticism. All this stuff, right?" And people were saying, "Well, you weren't funny to begin with." Well, I think that's such crap to say that his movies weren't good, because Old School and The Hangover, even Borat, are classics. Road Trip. These movies were extremely successful. It is a 2019 version of basically looking back at something and saying, "Well, that wasn't good." We're going to say The Hangover wasn't good. The first one was excellent. The second two sucked, but they made a trilogy out of it. It was so good.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. It's just to say he wasn't a successful director, writer of comedy is such an insult that these people just got offended over this, right? This cancel culture. But he basically said, that's why I got out of it. That's why I'm moving to this Joker film. And, people are coming for the wrong thing. I mean, this is a film that's going to be a great performance. It's going to be, you could make the argument that this will be the best Joker. Therefore, this performance could be Academy Award winning worthy without being rewarded, probably because he passed away, which I'm always on the side of, that they gave Heath Ledger the Joker that award because he didn't survive, and I don't know. That's my take on this. Your thoughts on Todd Phillips?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a Heath Ledger fan, so I think he deserved that regardless. Deserved that win regardless. But I digress. In regard to the performances themselves, funnily enough, that is the very original news stories that I saw about this. So even prior to the other story I referenced a couple of weeks ago, the first one expressing concerns at what the outcome of this movie could potentially be, prior to all that, it was the insanely positive reviews that were making the news, that this was a performance by Joaquin Phoenix that definitely deserved to win awards. So I think a lot of people had the movie on their radars for that reason, that it was an approach to a comic book character that was kind of upending things, and that is kind of paraphrasing Todd Phillips a little bit, because that was almost his goal. Just like you said, kind of seeing everyone, sounds like, come after his previous work. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to move away from comedy. Everyone likes comic book movies now, so I'm going to take a comic book movie and kind of upend it, flip it on its head, and do this in-depth character study, essentially. And then really what he's doing, and this did kind of come across to me, Garrett, when I first saw the trailer, it seemed kind of pretentious to me. The fact that they were trying to kind of make an art house film out of the Joker. So initially I had no real intent to go see this. Like, I'm not going to see it in theaters anyway, but I really had no intent to watch it at all. Like, the whole thing just had this air about it of, just like he said he wanted to do, upend things for the sake of upending them.
Right.
And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
It's like turning the Joker into the Purge.
Yeah. I mean, I think is understanding a turn that cinema has taken, though, where he's looking at what has been successful. I'm going on a slight side rant, I apologize. But where he's seen what's successful is the comic book movies, that the kind of independent films, the films with original storylines, the dramas, say what you will, those are not being successful anymore. So he's like, well, I'm going to tell one of those stories that I would tell otherwise that isn't necessarily about a comic book character, but I'm going to say it is about a comic book character so that I will get people's attention to come see this movie. You can put anybody else's name on this, not the Joker's, and keep this is a huge assumption by me, but keep pretty much everything else the same. But would it have been as successful? Probably not. Wouldn't have probably garnered this much attention from the media either.
Right.
So by saying, oh, yes, actually, Arthur Fleck, oh, he's the Joker. Yeah, he's the Joker. That's what we'll make this movie about. It's like, yeah.
No, that's a great argument. And you're not wrong. Granted, if he's a clown, you still might get some interesting viewpoints of people comparing him to the Joker.
Yeah.
But if you took away him being a clown and he was just simply a stand-up comedian without the face paint, and he goes on this, terrible downward spiral, I think people see it, but again, I think it passes like a ship in the night.
Yeah.
Now, I want to speak to something you said, Heath Ledger. Let me tell you who should have won that Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. This is funny.
What was the category? Yeah,
this
hit me with it.
Best Supporting Actor, he wins. You know who really should have won? And this is not a hot take. This is an interesting take because of how controversial this will be. Okay. But Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder was also nominated.
Oh, my word.
And that is a performance that, although you could not get away with today because of the, obviously, use of blackface, and just not just blackface, but entire cultural appropriation of that character, who's a character playing a character, or as he describes it, a dude playing a dude, described as a dude, so he should get 2 checks. That performance, again, understanding that it does not politically age well, is fantastic. And it's so funny that he does this, like, between Iron Man 1 and 2. Because if he did this today, like, he's not Iron Man anymore. Like, if we had the political climate we had, he's not continuing on as a Disney movie. If Tropic Thunder came out in 2015, you probably don't get the Infinity War Endgame with Robert Downey Jr.
No, probably not.
He would probably be removed. I mean, it's just that simple. But that performance, again, not taking away, I think Heath Ledger's performance was good. I think that, again, I think that his passing away cements his getting into character, being a method actor for this. I think the dedication. I get why they gave it to him, but Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, I think, is the best. Just such a great performance, and it's probably his best acting performance. It's probably Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance he's ever had is playing the dude from Tropic Thunder. When's the last time you saw that movie?
It has been probably since its release. Okay. I didn't see it in theaters. We might
need to watch that movie and just do like a review of it on this, because that cast is fantastic. I love Ben Stiller. So it's Ben Stiller. It's Robert Downey Jr. It's Jack Black. It's Danny McBride.
Yeah, that's right.
Who's it? Nick Nolte, I think, is in there. Tom Cruise is in there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just... Matthew McConaughey's in there.
The cast is stacked. There's no doubt about it.
It's just phenomenal. And, oh, man. I need to watch that movie again, because that him and Ben Stiller get into a... obviously the whole point of this movie is they're filming that war film, that Vietnam movie.
Yeah.
And they get into the scene where Ben Stiller gets his arms blown off, and he's crying, and Robert Downey Jr. is crying, but Ben Stiller doesn't want to be overdone by him or upended by him, so they're trying to outcry each other, and it's just this ridiculous scene, but it's just awesome. I just like Robert Downey Jr. goes, we're just like, what do you mean, you people? It's just like, I don't get it. Sorry. It's an awesome film. Anyways, digressing. What I want to talk to you next about after this Joker Todd Phillips thing is my hot take. Now, I'm not sure if anybody has made this hot take before, and I'm sure people have said it. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts. I have not heard anybody make this statement, so maybe you heard it here first. But my hot take is that every MCU movie going forward, or DC movie, every DC movie going forward, they should pivot and make it rated R.
Just lean into the curve.
Yeah. They need to make these films dark. They need to make them rated R. And that's the only way I feel like they're going to be able to compete with Marvel/Star Wars going forward. The success of rated R movies, there's not a ton of rated R superhero movies, but they're successful. So the most famous and probably best is Logan. Okay. Made almost over $600 million. Deadpool 1 and 2. So Deadpool 2 made it almost $800 million. The Punisher
got a big haul.
The Punisher in 2004, very successful. I shouldn't say very successful. Doubled its budget at least, so it wasn't bad. But I just feel like this DC clearly lost this first 4 phases of this fight, right?
Yeah.
We talked about previously movies. They're really only great success movies they've had were Wonder Woman and Aquaman. And I recently saw Shazam. Again, not that great. Suicide Squad 1, not that great. And I feel like if you really want to make this move, they have the darker characters. Pivot, make these movies rated R, and watch how successful they become. The Joker. This movie is going to be the best Joker performance we have. It's probably going to be the most successful Joker movie. Okay? Birds of Prey, which we'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold off on that. But you know what I want? Give me a rated R Batman movie. Give me a movie where Batman is actually killing people, not just beating them up. Because there's times where we've seen movies where you're like, well, that guy clearly didn't survive, but we never actually speak to the fact that maybe Batman killed somebody. Give me a rated R Batman movie. Robert Pattinson? You want to make him the best Batman ever? Perfect. I'm on board with Robert Pattinson. Make it rated R. Make it dark and brooding. You know what would be great? You know, I know they'd never make Superman rated R. But you know why I feel like they could make Superman rated R? Is because of the success of the Amazon show The Boys.
Oh, goodness.
Because we've seen what superheroes do against human beings from the Amazon series. You could make Superman rated R. Now, I know that they wouldn't do that. And so I'm not going to ask them to make Superman rated R. But all these other movies coming forward, Joker, Batman, anything like that, you know, take that pivot. Make it dark. Make it brooding. That's my take. And I feel like that would be extremely successful for them. That would pull them out of whatever rut they've been in. And again, not saying people have not made that argument before. I'm just saying I've not heard anybody make that argument that that's what they should do. I will say this. The Joker, as far as a rated R film, pre-sales, the only rated R movie that has sold more tickets pre-sales than this has been John Wick 3. This sold more than It, Chapter 2, and I think it sold so far more than Logan did. So
outsell Deadpool then as well?
Yeah.
Stands to reason if you're with those numbers? Interesting.
Correct. So I'm just saying it is a successful movie as being rated R. So people won't walk away from rated R movies. I know there were some people that made the argument that I've kind of shared this with before. That said, well, I won't take my kids to that. You probably didn't take your kids to The Dark Knight either, though. You know, might as well have been rated R, the way that movie was.
Yeah,
so, I mean, just because you're not going to take your kids to see it doesn't mean that they're not going to see it. And I just feel like as a successful move, DC should push to make these movies R. Pivot. Do something different. When Marvel's zigging, they should zag. Your thoughts on this, Joe?
They definitely need...
And then I want your thoughts on Birds of Prey.
Sure. They definitely need to do something to pivot, as you said, and try to get out ahead of everything Marvel's doing if they want to be successful, because I think they still are struggling. Now, overall, I heard generally positive feedback about Shazam. I know you weren't a fan, but I heard generally positive feedback overall. Wonder Woman, of course, everybody loved that. Aquaman seemed overall, once again, generally positive reviews. Obviously, there were some critics out there that were pretty harsh on it, but you'll always get that with superhero movies. So it seems like their most recent pivot has actually been working well for them, and they're leaning into more of the comedic aspects than R-rated aspects, be that language, controversial things, gore, whatever the case may be that they'd incorporate into an R-rated movie. So I think they are experiencing some success with the pivot that they are making. Now, that being said, there are some storylines within DC that are best served with an R rating, certainly. Similarly, just like Logan, I think was best served with an R rating. You can't really have the same effect of that, I don't think, with PG-13. And here's the other part to go along with that. You can't use your R rating as a crutch, though. That will fall flat. If you were going to give me a story that's set in a comic book universe, especially with comic book characters that we already know and love that aren't necessarily R-rated from their comic book counterparts, you can't use that R-rated as a crutch. You can't throw in gore for no reason. Don't give me language without any reason to have that. If you need to ramp up the intensity to actually make an impact because this situation was so awful and we need to show a specific outcome of this that only an R rating can serve, okay, if you're serving the story as a result of that, I can understand. And I do think there's a way for them to make that kind of impact and differentiate themselves from the MCU. But they can't do it as a crutch. They can't do The Boys. I disagree with that. They can't just go for shock value. And I don't think DC ever would strictly for shock value. But they can't pivot that hard. Nor should I.
And I understand your point. I will say, though, that we are entering a time period where, I keep forgetting the name of the film, the anti-Superman film.
Brightburn.
Okay. Brightburn, The Boys. You and I are going to cover The Watchmen starting October 20th.
Yes.
Okay. There is a world out there for some dark superhero stuff. Fine. Don't make Superman that villain. Okay. Batman has a world to live in where it's rated R. Like, I want to see what happens to a guy's face when Batman hits him with his forearm with those things on it. Like, show me that. Like, there is a world where Batman is extremely dark. And you know what? Killing Joke.
I was about to say the Killing Joke.
The most successful comic of the Joker. Let's get into this. There's an entire Batman world out there that we're not even touching yet because we can't make it rated R. Open up Batman. Leave the Flash alone. Leave Green Lantern alone. I don't care. Nobody wants to see those movies anyways. People want Batman.
Yeah,
if you
that's
want to
true.
repivot, relaunch Batman, make it rated R, and man, it's gonna sell anyways. Like we know Batman's gonna sell, but it's just gonna be better. Like if you would have made Jim Carrey's Batman or Val Kilmer's Batman rated R, it probably would have been better. Like, not gonna lie,
it would have been super weird, probably even
weird.
More weird, I should say.
All of a sudden, Doc Holliday pulls out some guns and starts shooting this
yeah.
No, I think that is a move that they can make. That is my hot take of this particular episode because Logan, Deadpool, Punisher, there have been rated R superhero arguable movies that are extremely successful, and the upcoming movies. And so again, I want you to speak to Birds of Prey in a second, but even Suicide Squad #2.
Yeah.
Make it rated R.
Couple things.
Go ahead.
Along with that as well. In terms of MCU dabbling with this, they have a little bit. I know you mentioned The Punisher in terms of the movie, I think is what you were referring to.
Correct.
But we can't forget, while they weren't movies, the series on Netflix, all of which have now been canceled. But that allowed them to explore a darker side of things.
Wasn't that a Marvel though?
Well, that's my point.
How do they own?
No, that's my point. I'm sorry that Marvel was able to kind of explore a darker side of it's not the MCU, but my understanding is that those stories still took place, within some of those things. So I don't.
Well, here's the thing. Punisher was successful. The problem with the Punisher though is that they canceled it because they're moving it over.
Well,
not because it wasn't great. Yeah. But you know what else you could do? Here's some of the other things you could do. You could do a new Constantine movie.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to just pick to the people we have. We like Watchmen. Watchmen's rated R. Right. Constantine.
We've got Blade.
Yes.
Let's not forget about Blade.
Right.
Yep.
Although Marvel owns it.
Well, yeah.
I'm talking about what DC can do.
Gotcha.
Okay. I just think that there's a way with Jonah Hex. I think there's a way these movies can be better.
Here's what we need. We need an Injustice movie. You familiar with
I'm not.
The games?
Not a nerd.
Very dark.
Okay.
It's a fighting game, very similar to Mortal Kombat in a lot of ways.
I've seen it then. Okay? I've seen the previews for it.
Super dark. And that'd be a very easy, dare I say, easy way for them to give us darker storylines that put our heroes in situations that aren't like anything we've really seen before. It's a very successful video game series, from my understanding. I think there might be some comics out there. Apologize, guys. I don't know if that's for sure or not, so shout at me if that's not the case. But there's material there, is my point. There's a very, I think, compelling, dark, eerie, interesting backstory that you could use for an Injustice series that has all of your favorite DC characters, that is set in a world that is incredibly different in tone than really anything we've seen from the MCU. So there's definitely, I think, a possibility for success there. Like I said, my main thing is it can't hinge solely on making an R for the sake of it being R. Like, it needs to deserve it for a reason that services the story. It would be my only...
And I don't disagree with you. I just think if I'm DC, and I know critics like Shazam, so that's fine. I think that Shazam isn't going to age well as far as being a great comic book movie. Suicide Squad 1, I think people like the idea of it at first because people are so into Harley Quinn, which is fine.
Right.
I don't know how well the second one's going to do. I think with Idris Elba joining it would be great. Whatever.
It's got a lot of...
It's got a good cast.
Heavy hitters. We've got James Gunn involved,
Correct.
Nathan Fillion. Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to be
It could be good.
Yeah, it could be good.
I just think that... I wouldn't be shocked if it's rated R. I just think that that's... If they can make it more adult themed. And again, I agree with you. You don't have to do violence for the sake of violence. But what I don't want to see happen is these guys walk through... And, Will Smith's character from the first movie is shooting a bunch of creatures / monsters / people, and they're just dropping like it's a Die Hard movie without any blood coming out. Like, show me some reality here. Show me some realistic viewpoints of stuff. That's really the argument why DC's always been so bad, is their fight scenes are so bad to begin with. They just don't have any great combat. Like, the reason why the movies suck are the villains are horrible. Anybody, I was talking to a guy at work. He just recently installed Shazam. He said the same thing. The villains are what's wrong with DC's universe. They're just bad. And if you're not going to get better villains, then the only pivot you have is to make the characters themselves more nuanced. And a more nuanced character is going to be more shades of gray and it's going to be darker. Is there a world where we have a more shades of gray Superman? I don't know. Maybe. But there is a world where Batman can be more shades of gray.
Yeah.
And we could have it where you could question, is Batman good? Is he bad? What do we think of Batman? And I think that's a take to have. And you don't just have to have Batman. You can have Robin. You can have Batgirl. You can have all these other people.
Yeah, you can have a lot of different characters.
Netflix's Gotham shows you that it can. Granted, it's not rated R, but it's darker.
That is super dark. There's been moments in that show that have caught me completely off guard with how far they were willing to take certain things.
Right.
Titans, I haven't seen it, but that's another very, very dark show from what I've understood about it anyway.
Do the movie where they torture Barbara Gordon. Like, that's a huge thing because of The Killing Joke. I think it's from The Killing Joke, right?
I believe that is from The Killing Joke, which was the animated movie is rated R,
right?
Actually,
right.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be the original backstory to Heath Ledger's Joker, from my understanding, was supposed to be what was.
I didn't know that.
I believe that a lot of what he took was from The Killing Joke, and so.
Gotcha.
But I know there's a lot of controversy behind that, and if this Joker with Joaquin Phoenix has this much controversy, the feminism critique of torturing Barbara Gordon just to torture Barbara Gordon is going to get that same critique if it's on the film. I'm just saying, as somebody who's got to revamp or vitalize or keep the DC universe vitalized, like, that's a story people will go to. Like, comic book fans will flock to that movie, and everybody else will too, just because it's a Batman movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it that The Killing Joke is kind of a landmark comic.
Yeah.
So people would absolutely show up to see.
People love those. What do they call them? Dark comics. What do they call them? Graphic novels.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, The Watchmen is going to show you, when we cover this thing for HBO, that it's not going to not be bloody.
Oh, I have no illusions about that. Yeah,
it's just going to be great.
And I'm very much looking forward to The Watchmen. I think it'll be a really, really great show. And I think as well, this pivot might already be starting to happen because we've got Joker. It's obviously got a hard R rating, whatever that really even means. But
yeah, soft R, hard R.
Yeah, so it's got an R rating. Birds of Prey, I don't think we know yet. Based on the trailer, they could definitely turn that very quickly to an R rating if they choose to do so. The Batman movie coming out in a couple years from now, there have been rumors about that being dark enough that it might be an R-rated movie. So we might be getting this pivot that you're talking about within the next few years. So
yeah, pivot. Yeah. Birds of Prey. You wanted to talk about this.
I did want to talk about it.
And are you really excited for this? Because I'm not.
I'm super excited for it. Like, it serves as such a counterpoint to Joker, where it still seems kind of like a pretentious movie to me. I get that the performances might be really strong. Obviously, we've already discussed a little bit about the controversy surrounding it. So, all in all, I'm not super excited about Joker. Then Birds of Prey trailer drops, and I'm super pumped about it. They even have Harley Quinn's hyenas in there. I mean, come on, that's fantastic.
Are you a big Harley Quinn fan?
I like Harley Quinn. I'm not necessarily a super fan like other people are out there.
Like, you're not dressing up as Harley Quinn.
Like, I'm not dressing up as Harley Quinn. Yeah, very true.
Got it.
But yeah, I think her character's awesome. The animated Batman series is the first time I ever saw Harley Quinn's character when she was actually dressed in kind of the jester outfit. But that's where her hyenas were. The hyenas are in the comics. So I didn't know if they'd have her hyenas in the live action, because it's a bit of a bizarre thing to, I think, translate to a movie, but they're doing it, and that is awesome. Some of the criticisms I already saw, because what's the internet if they're not throwing insults around at people, but they're like, well, you didn't show really anybody else that are the actual Birds of Prey other than Harley Quinn. I'm like, that's okay. Like, let's see what Harley Quinn's role will be in this movie for this first trailer. And then I'm sure we'll get more trailers that have the other characters that they kind of set up a little bit better than this first one. So I'm glad that this first trailer did focus on Harley Quinn and how much of a badass it looks like she's going to be. I'm really excited for it. I think it looked fun, but also dark. It had almost like a cyberpunk kind of feel to it, which, you know, I'm a big cyberpunk fan.
Yep.
So with all the neon and just her outfit, the craziness about it, it looks super fun, super exciting, and I'm very excited for it. But you are not, you said.
No,
why is that?
And that's because, not being a comic book fan, I am not, like, I'm going through the cast right now. I just don't have any knowledge of who these people are.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
Like, I know who Harley Quinn is. I know who Victor Zsasz is. Don't know who Huntress is. Don't know who Black Canary is. Renee Montoya, Cassandra Cain, Black Mask. I don't even know. Although Ewan McGregor playing a villain does interest me, because I did see a small clip of him. Looks like he's losing his mind. So maybe schizophrenic or whatever it is. I don't know. I think this is a movie that is going to be heavily, obviously, the reason why I think Margot Robbie is so forefront on this poster is this movie is going to have to land on her shoulders.
Oh, yeah,
There's no Will Smith in this movie. There's no Jared Leto, from my understanding, in this movie to help it. And I'm not a Margot Robbie fan. I just have never seen anything that I can think of that she was the star of on her own. I'm trying to look at her.
Well, I think she steals absolutely every scene that she's in, though.
In what? In the movie?
Well, she's in what? Wolf of Wall Street. She's in
but that's a
Suicide Squad.
Yeah, but in Suicide Squad, she's part of an ensemble.
Correct. But I get that she might not be the main character of everything she's been in.
But less sometimes is more.
Yeah,
and because
that's true.
She's able to come in as the side character to make those comments every once in a while. It's kind of like my favorite character in Game of Thrones was Bronn. Probably because he's not a main character.
Right.
Because every time I see him, he's doing great things. She's in Suicide Squad. She's able to be that person that's doing everything that's funny or interesting or entertaining because
she's got the random quips that she can throw out and stuff like that. No, I get it.
To become the main character, I mean, she was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but didn't talk, but for 15 seconds. So I don't know. I guess I'm not interested in this. I'm way more interested in the Joker. I feel like it's going to be more nuanced. I didn't think Suicide Squad was that good, so I'm not really excited to launch back into this universe with some of these other characters from the arguable Suicide Squad.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I think they're trying to differentiate that as much as possible. Like, I think James Gunn's Suicide Squad 2, which, just trying to go off memory here, I think he's not necessarily even calling it Suicide Squad 2. I think he's trying to make the name seem like its own thing again because they are trying to almost reboot it in a way, but you're trying to keep Margot Robbie there too as Harley Quinn, so it's not a full reboot because you're not recasting everybody. So it's an interesting look at how DC, once again, DC is getting a grip with how they're doing their movies, so they're trying to kind of find the actors, find the characters that are doing well and keep them, and if that means shuffling other people around, so be it. So they're trying to lean into their strengths in order to do that.
Okay.
But
okay,
it'll be an interesting next 4 or 5 years for DC. I'm curious how it turns out.
I'm interested to see which movie does better.
Yeah, I'm interested for that too.
I think that will be what's interesting. And so far, there's not a lot of media hoopla around Birds of Prey.
Right.
There will be a feminist approach to Birds of Prey. Obviously, from the looks of it, it's going to be a very strong female movie. So maybe that will help it. And I think that the fascination people have with Harley Quinn will help. But again, I think that as a side character, I don't know.
Yeah. I've always found it baffling, too, that people will put like relationship goals next to a picture of Harley Quinn and the Joker. Like, that's such an abusive relationship, and people, I don't necessarily think everybody understands how terrible of a relationship that actually is, like from comics and movies and stuff, and then they're throwing out there like relationship goals. So yeah, that shouldn't be relationship goals, but I digress. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, to sum that up, it will be interesting how everything pans out for DC here.
Okay. Well, let's move to the last topic, unless you had anything else to cover.
I'm good. Yeah, let's keep moving.
Interesting today, and this actually dropped today, so this is kind of like today's news. There was a story from the Hollywood Reporter talking about real-life Terminator. Major studios face sweeping losses of iconic 80s film franchise rights. So, kind of read into this. Didn't really understand what they were trying to say.
Yeah.
It is a copyright law from like the late 1970s. Basically saying that after 35 years, these grants that were made for copyright, they can go back to the original writer. And so, for instance, the Terminator, which we're on record for Dark Fate, and I love this franchise, which drives me nuts now because the idea that we're not going to get a James Cameron trilogy that he keeps promising.
I know.
Because
this changes everything.
What they're saying is that the Terminator franchise, specifically Terminator 1, is because, and that's really the one, Terminator 1.
Yeah,
is going to revert back to the rights of, who is it? Let me see who it is, if I can find it. Sorry, everybody. Skydance, I believe. and that Skydance, if they're going to make another movie, they have to basically go 50-50 split with James Cameron, or they need to buy him out. Sorry, not Hurd, not Skydance, Hurd, and then the guy's name is Gale Ann Hurd, is the original writer of the movie Terminator, and he's the one that had the copyright from 35 years ago. So if Skydance, which is the company, wants to continue to make more Terminator movies, James Cameron, who now owns the rights arguably to the other Terminator movies, will have to do a 50-50 split with him unless they buy him out. Now, this is not the only movie to be impacted.
It is not.
There are more movies to come out. For instance, Gary K. Wolfe is looking to terminate Disney's rights to the book Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I heard they were trying to remake, which the original Who Framed Roger Rabbit with Bob Hoskins is fantastic. You ever seen that movie?
I've actually not seen that
You should watch that movie. It's great. And there's like a rumor / story out there that post filming that movie, Bob Hoskins started talking to himself more because he was so used to all of his lines are filmed him talking to himself.
Yeah,
he's arguably talking to an animated
That's
bunny.
true.
So interesting. Beetlejuice, are trying to take the script away from Warner Brothers.
Yep.
Family novelist Roderick Thorpe is terminating Fox's grip on Nothing Lasts Forever, a.k.a. Die Hard.
That's right.
Okay. Also, other movies to potentially terminate their rights from the 80s are Predator and Nightmare on Elm Street. This is very fascinating. I had no idea that this existed.
Me either, man.
But the idea is that these people aren't going to be able to continue to remake these movies without resettling new copyright agreements or buying the rights out. But what it also means is the people who will now revert the ownership rights back to you can now sell them to somebody new. So now we can potentially get new remakes out of different categories.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
What else do you, any hot takes on this?
Yeah, this was also the first time that I had even heard of this being a thing. I didn't know that these types of copyrights, especially from this very specific year, or at least from the 80s in general, it seems to be the decade this is impacting, at least currently. I find it very fascinating. I think it provides a very interesting opportunity for other studios if they aren't able to reach settlements or whatever the case may be, renegotiate these contracts. If suddenly we live in a world where a completely new studio is revamping the Terminator series, like from just straight up level one, as if the others never even happened. And you know, the same thing with, Beetlejuice. If someone wants to remake the Beetlejuice
Which the rumor
series,
was that we're remaking a third Beetlejuice, or a second Beetlejuice movie with Michael Keaton.
Yeah, so another example there. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street got a ton of spin-offs and sequels.
Yeah.
Die Hard.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. I'm worried about this. So what they're saying is if there's not a new agreement made, which we're not saying there wouldn't be.
Correct.
That starting November 2020, there might not be another Terminator movie, which means James Cameron's new trilogy might fall apart before it even starts, which would be apropos for any other Terminator movie that exists, because there was supposed to be a Terminator trilogy off of Terminator Salvation, a Terminator trilogy off of Terminator Genesis, and Terminator Dark Fate. We might have just 3 simple standalone movies that don't amount to anything. Basically 3 different reboots of the franchise.
Exactly.
Which is just stupid.
Oh,
but
man.
I'm worried about Die Hard. I don't want them to touch Die Hard. I don't want them to make a 6th Die Hard, which I'm sure they're going to.
Yeah, it's
I'm sure Bruce Willis is
sure.
going to make one for a final payday. And I'll go see it because I like the John McClane character, and I only want to see Bruce Willis play it. I don't want a Die Hard movie. I don't. I think that Who Framed Roger Rabbit could be good as a remake. I don't think it will be as good as the original because it's awesome. Because Christopher Lloyd, who I'm a big fan of, is the villain.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
It's just great. Beetlejuice, I think they're rushing to make this movie, if I'm correct, and I can look that up here in a second. That they're trying to make the sequel, and they might be trying to do it because they're worried about this copyright infringement taking place.
Maybe they knew that was coming, so they're trying to get things going.
Predator, though, they've remade that so many times now.
Gosh, yeah.
I could care less.
Yeah, at this point with Predator, I mean, I would like to see more Predator movies, but it can certainly go to any other studio. Like, that doesn't bother me.
Correct.
At all. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all pans out. Now, did you, by any chance, see... You said November 2020 is the deadline for all of these, essentially?
Oh, they specifically stated Terminator.
They just say Terminator.
I think it's going to be by year.
Okay.
It has to be a 35-year mark.
That makes sense.
I think Terminator's just coming up first. Or maybe Terminator's the big enough name of a film that could lose its franchise rights.
Sure.
Because it's currently being made.
Yeah, exactly.
So, basically, and I'm looking this up right now on IMDb, and they're saying that Tim Burton suggested back in April that Beetlejuice 2 could be stuck in purgatory because they can't get it off the ground or make it fast enough to beat out this copyright infringement. So interesting stuff. I had no idea. And it makes you think about, either. I'm assuming if this is going to happen in the 80s, I'm assuming it's going to happen in the 90s.
Yep.
And it'll be interesting. Because basically they're saying, that James Cameron might not get another shot at this.
Yeah.
So, and that would make me so mad just because they have ruined that. They're ruining that franchise more and more. And it's like my favorite franchise.
Exactly. So that begs the question, is this a good thing? Let's assume for a second, which we have no way of predicting this outcome, but let's just assume for a second that none of the current studios retain the rights and that those rights are then sold to other studios. Is this a good thing that we are getting then potential reboots and remakes of popular IPs and franchises? Or is this just perpetuating the awfulness of the fact that all Hollywood does anymore is reboots and remakes?
So here's how I'll respond to that. Just based on some of the titles we've covered here. With Terminator, I'll be frustrated but not shocked because, again, this will be the third time this has happened now. I'm interested if they would keep a James Cameron director or, because of how successful he made the first two. If they don't have James Cameron, do they just completely reboot it again? Do they leave Schwarzenegger out of this and just completely go a different route? That would be interesting. Do they give us the John Connor war that people are asking for, the post-Judgment Day, so we don't have to have Schwarzenegger's character be involved in it? That would be an interesting take. With Predator, again, they've made so many Predators after Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator, that Predator 2, which although I kind of liked, if I went back and rewatched it again, I'd probably say this is terrible because Danny Glover should not be a replacement for Arnold Schwarzenegger in anything.
We've talked about this. I like Predator 2 quite a lot, actually. Yeah.
It's hard, if you're going to tell me that the Predator took out as many people as it did, of the caliber of people it did in the first film, yet Danny Glover with a 6-shooter is able to combat a predator, I got problems with that. And I saw the most recent Predator movie.
I have not seen
and
that.
And I thought it was okay. They're just getting more wild and crazy as they are.
Yeah, well, they got the whole super predator or whatever
they do. They have a predator that almost like the Terminatrix that hunts and kills Terminators.
Yeah.
This is a predator that's designed to hunt and kill other predators.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was okay. They set it up for a sequel.
Of course.
But again, you could reboot it quickly. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. Die Hard again is the one I don't want them to touch because I only want to see John McClane as Bruce Willis or Bruce Willis as John McClane. I'm fine if they do a Die Hard 6. Die Hard 5 is the only bad one in my opinion. I thought 4 was actually really good. I think 6 could be really entertaining if they do it, do it right.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't want them to take it back to, they could take it back to Nakatomi Plaza. I don't care.
I don't want them completely reboot it. Yeah.
Right. I don't want them to launch a new Die Hard without John McClane's character. And I don't want to see somebody else play John McClane because that is Bruce Willis. That's the role that made Bruce Willis who he is. So I'm anti them selling the rights. I think that they'll, people, and it all could be for nothing. These people could just end up paying a little bit more, retaining the rights of the films, setting another 35-year agreement, and we're not talking about this until we're collecting Social Security.
That is
we're going to be on podcast episode if we're still around podcasting because we're so good at this. 15,000, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So no, I don't know what to think. I thought it was a fascinating story to cover.
I totally agree with you.
These movie rights are coming up for renegotiation, essentially.
Yeah,
and the impact it could have on existing IP, specifically the one that's in current production, the Terminator. Mm-hmm. Granted, if they kill John Connor off in the first 5 minutes, reboot it. I don't care. Just put a fork in it, sell it, take it from Cameron, move it on. Joe, do you have anything else to end on?
Yeah, just a couple stray thoughts I'll just throw out there real quick. 6 Underground, a new Ryan Reynolds movie that will be coming out on Netflix. Yeah, December 13th is the release date of 2019 specifically. But it looks pretty wild, man. The premise, from what I can gather, for anyone who hasn't watched the trailer yet, is basically it's these 6 individuals that have, it seems like they've faked their own deaths, and now they're able to operate completely off grid to take on these very dangerous and ridiculous missions. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So also Spider-Man back in the MCU. Did you see that as well? That. Yeah. So credit to Forbes here real quick. I just wanted to quote kind of and sum up the story. So this was Forbes. I read this on. Simply put, Disney will put up 25% of the budget for the third Spider-Man movie in exchange for 25% of the profits. Kevin Feige will then serve as a producer alongside Sony's Amy Pascal. Yeah, Kevin Feige again. There.
Of course.
For the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, a film which will be part of the MCU. So
yeah, that's great.
Sounds like they've got Spider-Man swinging back to the MCU.
Great. I think that's fine.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I think that'll be pretty interesting. I'm glad that he's back in the MCU. And who knows what will happen from there. So other than that, I did want to just give a quick shout out to one of our listeners as well, Jeff. I understand you're not feeling well, man, and that really sucks. So I hope you get better soon, dude. But really appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and all our episodes to follow as well, man.
Perfect. I just want to speak to that Kevin Feige thing.
Yeah.
That's fine. Of course, he's going to have his handprints on that. Spider-Man, I'm okay. Again, the second one, not as good. Hopefully the third one comes back even stronger.
Yeah, I hope so.
But you know what? I think, like I said, Tom Holland's just great. So I'm on board for a third Spider-Man movie.
Awesome.
I'm glad he's in the MCU.
Yes.
Although, does this mean we don't get the Venom crossover?
You know, it didn't mention that, at least not in the article that I saw. Yeah. And we had previously talked about how this could be a good thing for Spider-Man going back to Sony because of the roster that they are developing for maybe Sinister Six, especially for Venom specifically. They're setting up the Venom vs. Carnage storyline. So having Spider-Man incorporated with that to team up, that would have been really cool. So we'll just, I think, have to wait and see how those conversations go. Best case scenario, what if he bounces back and forth?
Which is fine.
I think that could be really cool. If Sony and Disney actually develop enough of a symbiotic relationship, if you will, to actually have Spider-Man, Tom Holland Spider-Man, in both of these sets of movies, could be cool.
If I was Tom Holland, I'd ask for so much money.
Oh, dude,
if you're gonna
they'll probably pay him any amount of money he wants.
If you're going to represent both studios, I'd ask for so much money.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And who knows if they'll do that. I don't know.
Well, Joe, let's finish up tonight then. So that's all. I don't have any more topics to cover. Do you?
No, I do not.
No, this has probably gone long enough. Next week, Nate should be back with us.
Yep.
Nelly, again, if he can find his way out of the tree, he might be back with us. We're not sure. Hopefully he's got that deer jerky if he does come back.
That's right.
I know that we were supposed to do a review of V for Vendetta. We have not done that yet. We're going to do that on the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. If you've not subscribed to that, go out and do so. That is, a podcast that's going to cover the upcoming HBO show, The Watchmen, that Joe and I will start doing. That's going to premiere October 20th. We are going to cover that. So that show will air on Sunday night. We should be putting that podcast out, if we're able to, Monday night.
Yep.
So you guys should have it first thing Tuesday morning for our reviews and thoughts on that. Other than that, we will be back again with, like we are every Wednesday, with the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. Go out there, give us a review, leave us a rating, 5 stars. Email us questions, comments, concerns at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. Get us at Twitter at Alien and Cowboy. Like I said, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell Nate's mom, and we'll see you guys back next week. Cheers.
Cheers.